Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we are going to cover the Hindu newspaper dated 20th of February 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. Let's now begin the discussion. The article, "By agreeing to partition, Congress kept India united," appears on page number 11. And the article analyzes that had India accepted the cabinet mission plan proposed in 1946, what would have been consequences? Had India been better off or worse off as compared to what it actually is? It becomes very important for us to cover cabinet mission plan, its main points, and what would have been the consequences of cabinet mission plan had India accepted that, as it covers not only in our modern history, but also it is very important to understand the evolution of Indian Republic. Apart from that, UPSC has asked cabinet mission plan in 2015, as well as it has been asked as one of the options in 2013 prelims. So we'll discuss these two questions first. Then we'll see that whether we are able to answer these practice questions designed just from this article. Now the question asked in 2015 reads, with reference to cabinet mission, which of the following statements are correct? Statement 1, it recommended a federal government, which is correct. We'll see very soon how it recommended that. And the second statement is it enlarged the powers of Indian courts. And third statement is that it provided for more Indians in the Indian civil services. Both of these options are incorrect, which leads us to the right answer A, one only. Whereas in 2013, the question asked, Quit India movement was launched in response to, and the right answer is B, Cripps proposal. Now you know that cabinet mission plan was statement made by cabinet mission and the Viceroy Lord Vaibhav on May 16, 1946, that contained proposal regarding the constitutional feature of India in the wake of Indian political parties and representatives not coming to an agreement. Now it is important for you to memorize the members of the cabinet mission, and they were Lord Penthick Lawrence, Secretary of State for India Sir Stafford Cripps, and President of the Board of the Trade V. Alexander. Now you know that in September of 1945, the new elected Labour government in Britain expressed its intention of creating a constitutional assembly for India that would frame India's constitution. And the cabinet mission was sent to India in March 1946 to make this happen. Now the mission had to deal with a major obstacle, that was the two main political parties, the Indian National Congress and Muslim League, had fundamental differences over India's future. Now you know that while the Muslim League wanted the Muslim majority provinces of India to constitute a separate sovereign state of Pakistan, the Congress on the other hand wanted a united India. And the mission at Shimla conference attempted to facilitate an agreement between the Muslim League and Congress. And when this facilitation failed, the mission came out with its own proposals, which we know as Cabinet Mission Plan. So let's now have a look at the main points of this plan. Now it needs to be stated at the outset that the plan outrightly rejected the Muslim League's demand for a separate state of Pakistan and instead called for an union of India. And it proposed a unique federal setup that it hoped would be acceptable to the Congress as well as the Muslim League, because it came up with the innovative idea of groupings or sections as far as the states were concerned. So let's now have a look at the provisions of the cabinet mission plan, because it is important from both prelims as well as mains perspective. So first and the foremost, it provided for an interim government to be formed from the Constituent Assembly itself. Then it also provided the principles as well as the procedures of elections for the formation of Constituent Assembly. Now, as far as the Federation of India is concerned, it provided a very weak federal structure as compared to what we have currently, because it did provide it for a Union of India, but it limited the powers of Union to just foreign, defense and communication, whereas the states were given full autonomy as well as all the residuary powers which have not been mentioned in the Union specifically. As we have just discussed, that it divided the states into three categories, or the groups as we say, were not sacrosanct, And if a state wants to move from group A to B or from C to A, it can be done after the first general elections. Whereas this constitutional scheme of cabinet mission plan is concerned, it could be dissolved, or any state or province could ask for reconsideration of this constitutional scheme after the 10 years of the formation of the union. And as far as the princely states are concerned, they were no longer to be under the paramountcy of British government, and they would be free to enter into an arrangement with the successor governments or the British government. So you can say that princely states were set free to negotiate with the union on the terms and conditions in which they can stay into the union. So now the discussion on this article begins, where the author says that it has become a fashion to blame the Congress and especially the Nehru for the partition of India because it is alleged that had Nehru accepted this cabinet mission plan, India would have been a much larger country and much united country, on contrary what we see today. Now the author has four main objections to this. The author says that if the Congress leadership, and especially Nehru and Patel, had not accepted the division of the country, it could well have led to the dismemberment of India as we know it today. Because the reasons for that are that had India not accepted the Mountbatten Plan, or eventually what we had in the form of Independence of India Act 1947, India would have to go through this cabinet mission plan, and there was no other option. And we just saw that how this plan not only envisaged a loose federal structure with a very weak center, but also it laid the foundation of what author calls a crypto Pakistan plus. And we'll see how. So for that you will have to focus in the categorization of the states in cabinet mission plan. And Hindu majority states like Madras, Bombay, Central Provinces and United Provinces, Bihar and Odisha were kept in category A, whereas in B and C, Muslim majority states were kept and they were given full autonomy as well as the residuary powers. So you can see that anyways, even if India had not accepted the partition and went with the cabinet plan instead, then also the Muslim majority areas of the country would have the full autonomy as well as the residuary powers. Then the author says that such a loose federation created under cabinet mission plan with a very weak center would not be able to coerce or force the princely states into joining India and sign the instrument of accession, which was later on done by the Patel. And Patel could do so because he was the home minister of a very powerful union, which was not possible for a home minister created according to the cabinet mission plan because of the limited powers and more autonomy to the states. Also, the author puts forward the idea that the acceptance of the cabinet mission plan by the Muslim League itself demonstrates that their idea of creating Pakistan at a future date was going to be realized only in the scheme envisaged by the cabinet mission plan. Also, there was this provision in the cabinet mission plan itself where it said that after 10 years, the provinces or the states could ask for the dissolution of the union or the reconsideration of the constitution, which in any case would have led to the dissolution after 10 years. And finally, the author says that the functioning of the interim government formed in 1946 made it clear that the Muslim League was bent on thwarting the smooth functioning. And under the cabinet mission plan, the Congress and the Muslim League would have to form a joint government, and the administration of the country would have become untenable in those kinds of circumstances. So according to the author, these 5 points are the major reasons which should lead us to believe that India did the right thing in rejecting the cabinet mission plan while accepting major points of Mountbatten Plan and Independence of India Act 1947. So as you know that finally the cabinet mission plan did not bear fruits, as the Congress party soon rejected the grouping part of the plan as it was concerned and opposed the grouping of provinces on the basis of religion, while the Muslim League was not open to changing any part of the plan, and so any consensus between Congress and Muslim League broke down. Further attempts by the cabinet mission at reconciliation failed. So this brings us back to the practice question which we saw in the first slide. Had India accepted the cabinet mission plan, what would have been the consequences for Indian Union? And it is easy to see that anyways a crypto Pakistan like federation would have been created with a very loose union which would not have been able to force the princely states into joining the instrument of accession, and hence India would be a very perforated kind of territory. as well as the administration of India would have been untenable because of the disagreements between Muslim League and the Congress would have continued. And also, the provision of dissolution after 10 years would have ensured that the territories belonging to the Muslim majority areas would have anyway separated after 10 years. And hence, you can see that India could have been a worse off territory as compared to what it is now. Now, it is important to state at the same time that these are the views of the authors, but they broaden your horizon as far as important historical events are concerned. So this becomes important from the perspective of both prelims as well as mains examination. With this, we'll move on to the next news. The next discussion is on two articles appearing on page number 1 as well as on page number 10. And both of them deal with the visit of US President Mr. Donald Trump to India. An important outcome which is expected from the meetings of US President and Indian Prime Minister is that of advancements in resolution of issues between India and US as far as the trade is concerned. So what we shall do is we shall first analyze the context in which this trade deal is going to be concluded. Then the Trump's policy and how has it impacted India's trade with US? What are the fundamental disagreements between India and US? And how has US responded to these fundamental disagreements between India and US? So let us now begin our discussion with the context in which the US President is visiting India. Now you know that India has backed out of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is RCEP, which was supposed to be the world's largest regional trade pact. Now, after backing out of RCEP in November, India has shut the door on large integrated market that the deal was about to offer, and hence it has increased the pressure on itself to strengthen existing trade agreements with various other countries. And US is one such country, and hence India need to focus on that deal as well. Now you know that in last few years there is a global slowdown of the economies across the world, and which has reduced India's export potential in the global markets. So in this context, it becomes important for India to increase bilateral agreements and engagements with various countries, especially the large and developed countries like European Union and America. India also needs to diversify both the products as well as the markets across the world, and India needs to have a greater access to the developed markets. And in this context, when the United States President is visiting India, we need to sort these issues out. Just to give you a little bit of background of how the Trump's economic policies have impacted India, the Trump started with the campaign of Make America Great Again. And under that, the US practically carried out the review of almost all the existing trade deals which the United States had with various other countries. And in that, the special focus was on India and China, as these are the two countries with which the US has a deficit, which means that India has a huge surplus as far as the trade balance is concerned, which amounts to around $21 billion. And this infuriated the Trump administration, which led to the allegations of unfair trade practices by India, and according to the Trump, which was responsible for this large surplus which India has gathered with respect to USA. So as far as the India-US trade deal is concerned, there are a lot of fundamental disagreements between these two nations, and which deals with aspects of tariffs, subsidies, intellectual property rights, data protection, and greater access for agriculture and animal husbandry. So starting with the disagreements on tariffs, you must have heard that US administration categorically mentioned India as a tariff king, that it imposes tremendously high import duties. Also, United States President has specifically mentioned the example of Harley Davidson, which is the US motorcycles, to demonstrate the unfair practices by India includes very high tariff on US exports to India, that India imposes a very high import duties on products manufactured in USA. And according to the US administration, that this imposition of very high tariff duty has put these large engine motorcycles beyond the reach of most of the Indian consumers. And hence, it deters the US manufacturing. But the fact is that Harley Davidson already operates a plant in Haryana which has been assembling the bike since 2011. And Harley has still not been able to capture a sizable chunk of Indian markets. The acceptability or the Viability of these expensive bikes in India is not related to the import duties, but the US President has pointed out India on many forums, especially while campaigning domestically for the president's post, to demonstrate that how the countries like China and India impose very high tariffs on American products, hurting US economy. Similarly, the subsidies provided by India to its exporters have been challenged by US at WTO. And in 2019, India suffered a setback at WTO in a dispute against the US that had challenged India's key export subsidy schemes, including the one for special economic zones. And WTO ruled that these export subsidy programs violated the provisions of WTO. And US has alleged that India runs export subsidy schemes in almost each and every products which enable Indian products to compete very efficiently in US markets. As far as intellectual property rights are concerned, you know that United States Trade Representatives or the USTR has always maintained India in priority watch list for IPR violations. And the Trade Association of United States have always alleged that the actions taken by Indian government have not translated into concrete benefits for innovators and creators, and hence there are long-standing deficiencies in India's IPR regime. According to them, India remains one of the world's most challenging major economies with respect to the protection and enforcement of the intellectual property rights. The steps taken by India in the field of data protection have also angered the United States based internet companies, which allege that the steps taken by the Indian government will lead to data localization as well as the revenue loss. Also, US has long demanded greater access for American agricultural and dairy products into India. But for India, protecting its domestic agriculture and dairy interests is a major mainstay, and this was also one of the major reasons because of which India walked out of RCEP. So there is no way that we can provide greater access to American agro and dairy products into India. Now, US has responded in various ways as far as these trade issues are concerned. Now, the first and foremost, the United States administration has constantly labeled India as a tariff king, which has led to a significant loss of image as far as the global market is concerned. Then there are various actions by the US trade representatives, such as keeping India in the priority watch list for IPR violations. Then in 2018, US imposed additional tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum imports from various countries including India. Now this step by US government brought US share in India's steel exports to 2.5% in 2018 and 19 from a significant 3.5% in 2017-18. Also, in June 2019, Trump administration decided to terminate India's benefits under Generalized System of Preferences scheme or GSP scheme. As you know, that it provided for preferential duty-free access for over 6 billion worth of products exported from this country to the US. So you can see that the issues in trade relations between India and US are fundamental in nature, and they are multispectral, dealing in various aspects of trade and commerce. And hence there is a need for the top leadership of US as well as India to sit down and sort these issues out. Important for you to realize that US is very important for India as far as the trade is concerned, as it is among India's top trading partners for goods. So it is very important for these two nations to sort these issues out. Now, since this is a developing story and US President Mr. Donald Trump is expected to visit our country today, we'll see that what agreements will be put for agreement and how they pan out from there. Now, these issues shall be taken up as and when they appear in the newspaper. Let's now move on to the next news. Now, this next article, The Missing Piece in India's Defense Jigsaw Puzzle, appears as an editorial on page number 10. Now, this editorial analyzes the India's defense framework and states that despite being the fourth largest spender on defense in the world, India does not have a defense white paper which lays down a realistic framework for strategic requirement in the changing geopolitical scenario. Now, as you know that currently India's defense planning is lopsided towards the two front threats which are mainly from Pakistan and from China, and hence it lacks a strategic vision. Now, according to the author, the current framework has three main issues. Now, the first is that we overemphasize the two front threat. Now, if we look at the current acquisitions by the Indian military, for instance, the recent deals for acquiring Rafale jets, 200 Kamov Ka-226 light utility helicopters from Russia, S-400 Triumph air defense system, then maritime reconnaissance aircrafts, Apache helicopters, Romeo multi-mission helicopters for the Navy reflect the overemphasis and over-occupation with the threats from Pakistan and China together. But according to the author, the scenario has changed a lot, and it seems that China is more worried about the threats it is facing in the South China Sea and not so much concerned about its western frontier, which is the border with the India. Now, according to the author, the India's defense framework lacks clarity. A look at the plans of the armed forces indicates that the operational requirements are laid out towards very generic objectives and hence they lack a kind of clarity as well as far-sightedness. For example, the strategic objectives of Indian Air Force include deterrence on two fronts along with an offensive defense posture, enhanced air defense capability, enhanced combat force levels, and increased surveillance and automation of air defense. Similarly, most acquisitions in the army include artillery weapon systems, infantry weapons, tanks, etc., and hence they are again focused towards creating a two front deterrence. Now, the currently lack of modernization is also one of the issues plaguing India's defense framework. Now, as a thumb rule, any modern armed forces should have at least one third of its equipment in the state of the art category, whereas the rest can be of vintage and current category. So, 33% of the all equipments must necessarily be state of the art. But the reality is that currently India has only 8% of its weapons under state of the art category. Hence, according to the author, there is a need for a white paper which clearly lays down India's defense framework in the changing scenario. And what are those? Now, the first is that focus needs to shift from two front deterrence to Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is BRI, and the Indo Pacific region. Given that China is a formidable opponent in the neighborhood and projects such as BRI involve the sensitive sovereignty issues, India should clearly assess the nature of BRI, whether it is mainly economic or military, and then plan the response accordingly. India's defense white paper should also keep into account the Chinese spheres of influence in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and West Asia. Also, as far as Indo Pacific is concerned, it is well known that the geopolitical center of gravity has shifted from Atlantic in the 20th century to Indo Pacific in the 21st century. And hence, there is a clear need for India's defense framework to reflect these new realities. Also, as far as the emerging tech is concerned, there is a need for the Indian defense forces to modernize as the changing technology is bound to change the warfare scenario of 21st century. And India should plan for technologies of the future, including artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, and modern weapons like hypersonic technology, as well as cyber warfare. So, this article becomes very important from the perspective of mains examination, where you might be asked to put forward the changes which are needed for India's defense framework. Let's now move on to the next article. Now, the next news appears on page number 12, centered to form new law panel. Now, this news deals with the formation of Law Commission of India. Now, we have already discussed various aspects of Law Commission of India in our UPSC Prelims 2020 practice MCQs for the first part of the July 2019. Now, yesterday, Union Cabinet has given its approval to set up the 22nd Law Commission of India. Since Law Commission plays a very important role as far as our legal framework is concerned, it is important for us to know few things about it. Now, the first and foremost is that it is an executive body which is established by the order of Government of India, and hence you should keep in mind that it is not mentioned in Constitution of India, and hence it is not a constitutional body, as well as it is not constituted through any of the legislations created by the Parliament, and hence it is not a legislative body as well. Generally, the Law Commission has a term of 3 years with a membership of 7, and the convention is that chairman is always a retired Supreme Court judge. Now, as far as its functions are concerned, it is advisory in nature. Independent India got its first law commission in 1955 and MC Setalwad was its first chairman. It also had a term of 3 years. Now, as far as the importance of Law Commission is concerned, Law Commission of India is an advisory body and has been a key instrumentality in the process of law reforms in India. For example, the inclusion of Article 39A, which says that the state shall secure that the operation of legal system promotes justice, was done on the recommendation of a report of Law Commission. Now, another important aspect of Law Commission is that it has played a key role in a number of decisions of Supreme Court, as the latter has referred to the work done by the Law Commission and has followed its recommendations on various instances. Another very important aspect of existence of Law Commission is Article 372 of our Constitution says that pre-constitution laws will continue until they are amended or repealed or they violate any of the provisions of the Constitution of India. Now, this article mandated the need of a central law commission which could recommend repeal, revision, and updating of the inherited laws to serve the changing needs of the country. And hence, one of the important aspects of the existence of law commission is to suggest changes in the existing framework of our legal system from time to time. So, from the perspective of preliminary examination, it is important to keep in mind that it is an executive body, not mentioned in the Constitution as well as not created through any legislation. The convention is that the chairman shall always be a retired Supreme Court judge. But there is another aspect to the existence of Law Commission, which is from the mains perspective, and hence it is important for us to realize the need or the importance of such a commission. But there are various challenges as well in the way Law Commission exists and functions. Let's now quickly have a look at that as well. Now, there are three main challenges regarding the Law Commission of India. We know that its recommendations and reports are advisory in nature and which most often than not leads to the rejection or the non-implementation as far as the Parliament and the Government of India is concerned. And hence, it leads to redundancy of having such a commission. We also know that Law Commission of India works within Ministry of Law and Justice. And it works very closely in association with the same ministry, which also deals with the lawmaking procedure. And hence, there is a concern that Law Commission does not have an independence of thought as far as the innovations and novelties in lawmaking are concerned. And hence, there is a need to distance the Law Commission of India a little bit away from the Ministry of Law and Justice so that the independent thinking can be ensured. Also, there is no law which backs the Law Commission of India, and it is mostly convention based. And hence, we need a law or a legal framework to not only define the membership, chairmanship, the tenure, and various immunities, but also the terms of references so that they can work independent of the interference from the executive. So, this is all as far as Law Commission of India is concerned. Let's now have a look at the next news. The next article appears on page number 12. ART bill proposes National Registry of Clinics. Now, the Union Cabinet yesterday has approved the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill 2020 to monitor medical procedure used to assist people to achieve pregnancy. So first we'll understand what assisted reproductive technology is, then we'll understand the need for introduction of such a bill, then we'll go through the main features of the bill. Now, assisted reproductive technologies are those technologies or medical procedures which are used primarily to address the issues of infertility. Now, there are various kinds of procedures which can address the issue of infertility, and one of the most important of them are in vitro fertilization, which is a process of fertilization where an egg is combined with sperm outside the body, which is in vitro. Cryopreservation, which is a process where gametes are preserved by cooling to a very low temperatures, and intracytoplasmic sperm injection is also an in vitro fertilization procedure in which a single sperm cell is injected directly into cytoplasm of an egg inside the body. So these are the three main processes related to assisted reproductive technologies. Now, since the government has introduced this bill, so there must have been a need for this bill. Now, assisted reproductive technology has grown by leaps and bounds in last few years. India has one of the highest growths in ART centers and the number of ART cycles performed every year. Now, ART has obviously given hope to millions of people who are suffering from infertility, but has also introduced a lot of legal, ethical, and social issues in India. For example, India has become one of the major centers of this technology in global scenario, with reproductive medical tourism becoming a significant activity in our country currently. Now, it is important to mention here that clinics in India offer nearly all the services related to ART, whether it is related to gamete donation, or insemination, or in vitro fertilization, or cryopreservation. However, in spite of so much activity happening in India, there is yet no standardization of protocols and reporting in the country currently. Also, there is a need to regulate the ART services to protect both affected women and children born out of such procedures. So, for example, the oocyte donor needs to be supported by an insurance cover, as well as she needs to be protected from multiple embryo implantation, whereas the children born out of ART should be provided all legal rights equivalent to those of biological children. So, all these issues in combination call for a law which regulates these activities. And hence, the Government of India has responded by bringing Assisted Reproductive Technologies Regulation Bill 2020. Now, since this bill has been introduced yesterday, only few of the details are known and we shall discuss them. Now, the bill constitutes national board which shall lay down the code of conduct to be observed by persons working at clinics. It will also set the minimum standards of physical infrastructure for laboratories and diagnostic centers, and it will also notify the qualifications for the human resources working in such centers. And it shall also constitute state level boards which shall have the responsibility to follow the policies and plans laid by the national boards. Now, the bill also provides for National Registry and Registration Authority to maintain a central database and assist the National Board in its functioning. The bill also proposes for stringent punishment for those practicing sex selection, sale of human embryos or gametes, as well as people running agencies, rackets, or organizations for such unlawful practices. So these are the key provisions of the bill. It remains to be seen that how the discussion in the parliament goes through, and then only we will be able to understand the various flaws or issues in the bill. So from the perspective of prelims examination, it is important for you to understand the procedures which are included under the ART, which are in vitro fertilization, cryopreservation, and intracytoplasmic sperm injection. As far as the provisions of the bill are concerned, these are the key provisions which will become important for your mains examination. Let's now move on to the next news. Now, the first question is, consider the following statements about the Cabinet Mission Plan. Statement 1, it provided for a weak union, which is correct, as we have seen that the powers given to the union were limited to only 2 or 3 sectors, and rest of the powers, including residuary powers, were given to the states. And the statement 2 reads, the states could change the groupings after independence, which is incorrect, as the states could only ask for rearrangement of the groupings after the first general elections, and hence the right answer is A, 1 only. Now, the second question deals with the Law Commission of India. Statement 1. Law Commission of India is an executive body, which is correct. You should remember that it is neither a constitutional body nor a statutory body. And the second statement reads, the chairman of the Law Commission has to be a retired judge of the Supreme Court, which is correct. You should know that it is just a convention that a retired judge of Supreme Court is appointed as a chairman of Law Commission, but it is not mandatory and the government can change this anytime they want. And hence again the right answer is A, 1 only. This brings us to the end of today's DNS. Let's have a look at the question of the day. Now first we'll discuss the answer for the question of the day of 19th February. Consider the following statements. Statement 1. The supervision and control of panchayat elections is done by the State Election Commission. And statement 2. No panchayat by polls have to be held if the duration left for the next term is 1 year. And the statement 2 is incorrect, whereas statement 1 is correct, and hence the right answer is A, 1 only. Now the question for the day for 20th of February 2020 is, consider the following statements. Statement 1. Currently there is no law regulating ART or assisted reproductive technologies in India. And statement 2 is, ART means IVF or in vitro fertilization only. The options are A, 1 only, B 2 only, C both 1 and 2, and D neither 1 nor 2.